Okay, I believe we can begin. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure of mine to welcome you all here in Brussels as well as online for today's event. Our event is on circular economy in cities and regions, tackling challenges and seizing the opportunities. Today's event is hosted by the European Policy Center and supported by the Welsh government. My name is Anna Berdzenishvili, and I'm an analyst here at EPC Sustainable Prosperity for Europe program, and it's a pleasure of mine to be moderating today's event. Before I introduce my wonderful panel here, I would like to highlight why this conversation is so timely and relevant today. As you may know, resource consumption is at an all-time high and still climbing. Every year, over 100 billion resources enter, raw resources enter the global economy. And only 10% of those get reused or recycled. So in other words, the world still remains 90% linear. So when we consider this linear model, it's affecting our planetary limits, starting from carbon emissions to hitting biodiversity loss. So when we think about a circular economic transition, it's not only essential, but it's wanted and necessary. Nowhere is the shift more critical than in our cities and regions. Cities and regions, they generate nearly 2/3 of global waste, as well as have high energy demands and produce over 70% greenhouse gas emissions. Yet there are also places where solutions emerge. As hubs of innovation and transformations, regions and cities have the power to design, test, and scale up circular solutions. So when we talk about cities and circularity, it's a strategic pillar when it comes to Europe's competitiveness as well as resource security. So with this background in mind, we will explore how cities and regions can lead this transition, break down barriers, as well as scale up circular solutions. To help me navigate this topic, I will now introduce our amazing panel. Firstly, we have Aurel Ciobanu-Dordea, Director of Circular Economy at European Commission's DG Environment. We have Rhodri Asby, Deputy Director of Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency at the Welsh Government. We have Louise Coffineau, Head of Advocacy at Eurocities. And finally, and definitely not least, we have Jordi Pascual Turner, Junior Program Lead at Senior Program Lead at Circular Economy. After hearing from our main speakers, we will also be joined by 3 respondents. The respondents will share their reflections on today's discussions, as well as help kick off our Q&A session. The respondents that we will hear from are Freek van Dijk, Director of Circular Hotspots in Holland, Alexander de Schonen, Head of EU Affairs at Suez, as well as Aline Margret, Head of Policy at Zero Waste Europe. As mentioned, they will help kick off our Q&A session. So for those online, please keep in mind to write your questions in the chat throughout the entirety of the event. But for those of you that are here in person, you will have to be a little bit patient. So when the time comes, you can just raise your hand and a microphone will be passed to you. So without further ado, I believe we can start our amazing discussion. It is my pleasure to firstly invite Aurel to speak about EU policies that help in the circular transition, especially reflecting and keeping in mind the role of cities and regions. Please, Aurel, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. What an amazing opportunity. If we use more the amazing word, we start sounding like President Trump. Thank you very much for this amazing invitation and for the opportunity, and thank you very much for your attention. I would say from the outset that I'm here to keep you bored, in particular those who travel frequently to different debates around the city. In order to hear what is going on circular economy, I'm here to deliver the same messages, because this is very important that you hear a consistent set of messages from the European Commission. Now, of course, I am joking, but to a large extent, I will repeat a number of issues or messages that we have been delivering in the past. And there is a good purpose for this, in order to make sure that all this vast audience which works in the Brussels bubble hear about these intentions and the same messages from the Commission. And one of the important messages is But of course, you are following the significant policy papers that have been adopted recently at the beginning of the mandate, the Competitiveness Compass at the end of January, and the Clean Industrial Deal communication at the end of February. And they show that circularity together with decarbonization, but maybe to different extents, remains very important for the political agenda, at least in this area of competitiveness and reindustrialization of the political agenda of the President of the Commission, which has been translated into the political guidelines and ultimately in the competitiveness compass. So in a way, we can say that the European Green Deal agenda continues. Contrary to what some critics say, it continues, but we have also heard the messages coming from the industry, from other stakeholders as well, that there is a need for fine-tuning some of the measures in order to make sure that the durability of the commitment, political commitment, economic commitment, continues in support of this agenda. And the first pillar of President von der Leyen's agenda on decarbonization and competitiveness is a response to these concerns expressed over the last period. So if the Green Deal continues, the decarbonization drive continues, and as the decarbonization agenda and the fight against climate change has been implemented and developed over the past few decades, we have seen a number of achievements attained and delivered, but we have seen also that a good number of measures, while delivering their results, have still left room for improvement. We are not yet there where we thought 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when this drive has started. We are not yet there where we expected to be. This means that more hands are needed on the deck in support of these goals. So in a new wave of recruitment, of policy interventions, also circularity can make a contribution. And maybe some have realized this as a revelation. But in any case, it is very good, and we are very happy to see that there is also political awareness in support of circularity. And this is not a topic just for the nerds and for the ultimate experts in policy making and in the world of science, but that the political decision makers have started to be very aware about the potential next to the industry. And the political agenda of this mandate in the European Commission is also a response specifically to such industrial statements like the Antwerp Declaration, where a wide range of European industrial sectors and also non-European investors here in Europe have called on the European Union and its decision makers to, among many other things, and I'm not claiming that circularity is a silver bullet, but have called on the European decision makers to also take measures that create a demand for circular products, circular materials, circular economy services, and improve the functioning of the single market. And in a way, these two vectors, if I were to simplify very much, how to create demand or to improve the demand for goods and services resulted from circular economy activities, and how to improve the functioning of the European single market, not just for the goods and services, but for the secondary raw materials, are at the heart also of a significant, but by no means the only one, significant regulatory intervention that we are preparing for the end of 2026, the Circular Economy Act, for which we are reflecting, and we are listening also to the different stakeholders, and we are engaging in bilateral dialogues with European associations, or sometimes even with individual economic players, in order to identify what are the measures that would make a positive difference. And maybe this is another message that I would like to leave with you, at least at the outset of our exchange this afternoon, is that we are looking to bring forward, under the aegis of the Circular Economy Act, measures that make good economic sense and that are seen by a majority of players as making good economic sense and as being helpful for the attainment of the goals of resource efficiency, circularity, and also decarbonization. But as I've said, Circular Economy Act is a major regulatory intervention. We envisage at this point in time to bring forward a proposal for a regulation that will cut maybe through several pieces of existing legislation, sometimes turning provisions of directives into regulation type interventions, and also maybe bringing some novel, let's say, regulation type vertical interventions on specific issues. But it's only a significant piece of the puzzle. We envisage we are contemplating at bringing forward also a number of satellite measures around the Circular Economy Act to see whether we can leverage, for instance, some implementing measures under the waste shipment regulation, or whether by enabling the chemical recycling of plastics, we can contribute to the same goal, even if this measure will be brought forward before the Circular Economy Act will be proposed, or to bring forward under the Waste Framework Directive already end of waste criteria for mechanically recycled plastics, or to give another typologically completely different example. We aim before the end of the year to bring forward, together with European Investment Bank, a document relatively modest, but we hope that the content will be more significant, what we call now investment compass. So an agreement between the European Commission and or a shared understanding, shared understanding between the European Commission and the European Investment Bank about which are the priority areas and technologies that represent a priority for the development of the circular economy across the European Union, based on a broad diagnostic of where we stand now across the 27 member states. And we hope that this will this will represent a lodestar not only for the use of structural funds or the future of the structural funds under the next MFF, by the European Commission, not only for the lending policy of the European Investment Bank, but it should be a signal also for the commercial lenders across the 27 member states. So, and those of you who have taken a closer look into the Clean Industrial Deal communication have seen also other elements. I would be happy, but I don't want to take too much time. I would be happy to elaborate on a number of core elements that we have in mind in the Circular Economy Act, but I would like to, because these elements are in any case in the open, can be found in that communication. I trust your reading power, and I would like now to leave some room for intervention to the other co-panelists. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Aurel, for your insights. I believe you create a nice setting for what the EU's vision is and what the potential policy framework will look like. I think it's important to highlight that there is political awareness from the EU side, and they understand the importance of circular economy. This was already displayed in the competitiveness compass, as well as the clean industrial deal, but it's interesting to see that there's more to come. And of course, we'll be also very interested to hear more about the Circular Economy Act. I'm sure the audience will engage with that with their questions. I think this creates a perfect segue to our next speaker, who will highlight more the regional role. And so I would like to give the floor to Rhodri, and I'm looking forward to hearing Welsh's example as being a leader when it comes to circular economy. So please, the floor is yours.
Diolch, and prynhawn da pawb. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to have the chance to speak here today on the work that we're doing to transition to a circular economy in Wales. The Welsh Government's aim is a very simple one. It's to become a zero waste and net zero carbon nation, but also to use our fair share of the Earth's resources. Back in 1999, though, we weren't such a good example as we are today, because at that point we sent 95% of our waste to landfill and we recycled less than 5%. But thankfully, since then, we've dramatically improved, and Wales has now into a recycling nation. Our municipal landfill has fallen to less than 1%, and our plan is to phase it out very soon entirely. In parallel, last year, it was announced that we'd climbed to second in the world for recycling. If there's anyone here from Austria, we are right on your coattails. So with over 66% of our waste now recycled, and with every household and every business in Wales playing its part. Our recycling success is underpinned by several core factors, including a clear long-term vision, consistent policy, a progressive regulatory regime, investment in infrastructure, and expert support and guidance focused on improving the services for citizens. But more than anything else, at the heart of our success has been partnership working. The progress we've made is testament to team effort. The partnership in particular between Welsh Government and our local governments, with the waste sector and our delivery partners, and our citizens across Wales who have embraced in their homes and business our recycling mission. This has seen recycling now just simply become a part of who we are. It's who we are as a nation, and it's embedded in our culture. Our approach has also been one which has championed sustainable development, and that's where our journey towards becoming a circular economy has its roots. As one of the very first nations on Earth to enter into the Industrial Revolution, whilst we're proud to be at its forefront, Wales's experience also means that we understand all too well the legacy that an extractive economy can leave behind. In advocating a circular economy approach, we therefore do so knowing only too well the environmental and social issues that extraction can cause. The sustainable development duty that's enshrined in our constitution has been an essential element which underpins our approach, not only to the circular economy, but also to a just transition. In 2015, we passed the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, where we built upon the Sustainable Development Duty and have enshrined in law well-being goals linked to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and placing a legal requirement on the Welsh Government to think about future generations in everything we do. In 2016, we built on this further by becoming one of the first regional governments in the world to legislate for carbon budgeting. And then in 2021, we adopted our first circular economy strategy beyond recycling. The strategy takes a systemic approach to the transition to a circular economy, recognizing not only the essential role of action on the circular economy in tackling the climate and nature emergency, but also the scale of the economic opportunity and the social benefits it can bring. Being resource efficient can make our economy more productive. More resilient supply chains mean stronger local economies. And in a decarbonizing global economy, the transition to a circular economy is important to both competitiveness and resilience, as you've just heard. This is why in implementing our strategy, we've followed a number of actions, including the creation of a circular economy fund for business to help support innovation, to help, for example, adapt processes to use recycled material or to increase resource efficiency. We've also worked to implement extended producer responsibility, as I know examples are also taking place across Europe. Working with the UK, Northern Ireland and Scottish governments, our scheme will be commencing on packaging this year. It will, of course, incentivize producers to reduce the materials they use, improve product design and maximize recycling, but also encourage the long-term move to more widespread reuse. In parallel, we're working strategically with companies to put in place the economic infrastructure that we need to move to a circular economy, with high quality recycling in Wales helping to attract now inward investment, with the state-of-the-art plastic recycling facility announced for South Wales and a new paper and cardboard recycling facility in North Wales. And we also have examples like the UK's Royal Mint, who are extracting precious materials and reusable components from electronic waste at their groundbreaking facility. Alongside, though, our partnership with business, we are continuing to build on our partnership with local governments, which has been so pivotal to our success to date, rolling now out the infrastructure for repair and reuse, where we previously rolled out the infrastructure for recycling. 80% of our local authorities now have dedicated reuse or repair facilities serving their communities, with those in the remaining 20% on their way. In addition, in partnership with the third sector, we've been establishing a network of repair cafes in 120 communities across Wales, and benthyg libraries of things. Benthyg is the Welsh word meaning to borrow, at 23 sites. This service enables people to lend and share tools and equipment rather than having to buy their own, something which is especially important in a cost of living crisis. So this highlights that the answers to the challenges that we face lie not in tackling each one in isolation, or relegating action on challenges like climate change to the longer term. A circular economy approach shows that win-win solutions are feasible. And this is demonstrated through our work also with an organization called FareShare, where we've expanded their network for food redistribution of food that would otherwise be wasted across Wales. Last year, they distributed over 2 million meals for vulnerable people with food that would otherwise have gone to waste. Anyway, as you can tell, we're proud of what we have achieved so far, but recognize that there's much more to do. It's therefore more important than ever that we collaborate, seek out good practice wherever we find it, and build networks to share and learn. In October last year, we were honored to have hosted the International Circular Economy Hotspot event in Cardiff, where we were proud to join the Hotspot family as it grows and becomes fully global, with conferences in Africa and in both South and North America, alongside ours in Europe, and a program planned this year, which has also expanded to Asia and Australasia. At the conference, we had insights from across the world with more than 400 people attending, and it was an opportunity to build and strengthen partnerships, as well as work internationally with other nations and regions. The presentations and discussions emphasized not only the crucial importance of the circular economy, but the part it can play in growing the green economy and ensuring all our communities share in the benefits of a just transition. In picking up the baton from last year's event in Ireland, Dublin, we now pass it to Slovenia for the European hotspot, and to Taiwan to host the event in Asia. Following on from the hotspot, I'm therefore pleased to be taking part in this event today. And having been at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution, our aim in Wales is to equally be at the heart of the transition to a circular economy, building on our progress on recycling to date, but as reflected by the title of our circular economy strategy, working to go beyond recycling, recognizing the importance of working with partners at home and internationally to do so.
Thank you so much, Rhodri, for your insights. I believe you showcase how Wales very much is a trailblazer when it comes to circular economy, but not just that, when it comes to climate change challenges as a whole, as well as guiding through just transition. I believe it's important to highlight with what you said, with the practical measures that you mentioned that the Welsh are taking at the regional level. For example, having the circular fund, as well as connecting with the local community, because it's important to realize that local support is necessary for these changes. So it's clear that Welsh is a great example today. So we loved hearing your insights today. Thank you so much. I think now, as we've talked about the regional perspective, it's good to hear what cities are doing. What's the role of cities here? What's working? What's happening? So Louise, thank you so much for coming. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for the organization of this event, EPC, and thank you to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be here and actually to talk about all the successes that cities are undertaking when it comes to circular economy. I heard lots of things that you do at the regional government, and I think it's very complementary. But something strikes me, it's when you say that we cannot take circular economy in isolation. You cannot only address different parts of it. And I think this is absolutely key to just think circular economy as a circle, right? And many of our cities have understood it and have taken circular economy as a strategy for decarbonization, as a strategy for growth, as a strategy for jobs, you know? And I have plethora of examples because our cities are doing a lot, but I would just like to highlight a couple before talking about the challenges actually they face and how we could overcome them. So you may know that the city of Amsterdam is quite a leader in circular economy. They have implemented the donut economics from Kate Raworth. I'm sorry to not pronounce it properly, but the idea is to take a donut, right, with a hole in the middle, and in the middle you have the existential social needs of people. At the outer ring you have the planetary boundaries, and you need to fit all the needs of a city into this donut, right? And so you have to think about the way that you build, being houses or roads, or the way that you procure food in your canteens. Everything has to sit into this donut, and this is really how they apply their growth and decarbonization strategy up to 2050 using this circular approach. The city of Helsinki has also used the circular economy as the climate neutral strategy by 2030. And they really rethought the way that they consume food, consumer goods, and construction, and have really applied the concept of circular economy to many different sectors. Then you have some different initiatives absolutely everywhere in cities. Some of them are quite very interesting because they touch upon much more than waste or circularity. For instance, the city of Bordeaux has decided to create, to use an old submarine terminal used during the World War II to store materials from the construction site that needs to be reused, that can be reused, being doors, windows, and they offer that to the theater or to the concert premises and so on, so they can use it to create their show. So they are combining culture and reuse of construction materials in order to create value there, and especially not to lose value, because we have so much secondary materials in Europe that we put in landfill, unfortunately, or that we burn, incinerate, that we could reuse. Barcelona has set up a circular economy house on their territory to put together startups, circular actors coming from, like, the baker is there and assessing how we can reuse yeast from a different, from the vineyard, actually. So they are trying to rethink completely the way that people work together. And then perhaps the last example is the city of Malmö that has reused also an old boat terminal that were used to link, before we had the bridge between Malmö and Copenhagen, there was a boat that was doing the way and turn, and they don't use the terminal anymore. But this terminal was massive and was full of marbles and tiles and equipment, and they have reused this space to give it for free to builders, architects, and so on, to encourage them to reuse them on future projects. So they are doing a lot. But we could make their life easier. And I look a bit at you, Aurel, on that. We have discussed many times that cities have huge potential for circularity. For instance, they use public procurement. Cities are big purchasers. If you have read the current, the recent strategies of the Commission, they say that 14% of the EU GDP is on public procurements. And most of that falls into the hands of local authorities. But today, using public procurements for circularity is such a complex thing. I will give you an example. Today, we don't have the carbon footprint of construction materials. We don't have a compulsory life assessment of construction materials that creates like a material bank, and you can go and you can assess actually the carbon footprint of an overall construction or building and so on. So the city of Helsinki has launched a competition for developing a district, and they really put as a threshold, you have to have the lowest carbon footprint ever to win the competition and to be able to build this district. Well, the people that received the procurement at the end, they were completely lost because they were comparing pears and apples. There is no way to compare the carbon footprint between timber and low carbon cement today. So the city of Helsinki, which is a massive administration, had to hire people to create material banks into the city administration to be able to measure and to compare the different offers. Only a city like Helsinki can afford that. Not any other city can do that. So the life cycle assessment of construction product is necessary. And unfortunately, in the revision of the construction product regulation, we didn't manage to have it. But I have seen that in the clean industrial deal, there is potential for a voluntary life carbon assessment of some materials like construction. So still a step ahead. Then boosting second-hand markets. Today we don't have a second-hand market, and you've said it, and we still have to do lots of cities are setting up their own systems. So, for instance, the Swedish cities, they have created an online platform where you can match the supply and demand for secondary materials. So you put your doors, you put your windows, and some people buy it, and it cannot stay at such a small local level. It cannot. It has to be expanded. It has to be scaled up. And so many cities are putting in place there's examples. The city of Haarlem has an app. Now you're an architect, you have an app, and you can check if you will find the windows the right size to put on your new project. This should be scaled up. Absolutely. There is a huge potential there. Extension of extended producer responsibility. So cities currently bear the cost of all waste management in Europe. It's a lot. So it includes construction, it includes textile, although it will change. It includes food. So it has to change as well. At some point, if we want to make people realize that we are moving to a circular economy, and it's not just you buy, you use, you waste, the cost need to be reflected somewhere. Either you make the producer pay for the pollution they create, will be a way, or the producer decided to put it on the citizens. But we'll have to put a price somewhere. We cannot continue to imagine that we pay, we use, we waste without having an extra cost, which is linked also to the fact that virgin materials today are still less expensive than secondary materials. That needs to change as well. Otherwise, we will never encourage people to use secondary material. Two last things, and then I stop. A circular economy is a clean economy. You cannot recycle, or you cannot reuse or recycle things that contain hazardous substances and pesticides or pollutants. We cannot. Right, so we need to put on the market first things that are respecting the planet, things that are free of pesticides, free of pollutants, and free of hazardous substances. And last point, skills. I think we haven't talked about that yet. A circular economy is an economy where people know about new circular models, right? Or they can implement it in their work. And currently, those green jobs don't really exist, or if they exist, we don't have enough skilled workers to develop circular economy models. So their cities have a big role to play as well, because they can set up training programs with companies, actually with the industry, with academia, and so on, and they can help to reskill the people based on their territory. So we're also very happy to see that in the clean industrial deal, there will be this dialogue on circular economy, and we hope that cities will be invited, because to identify exactly the needs that the circular economy have when it comes to green jobs, you need to have the local leaders around the table. You need to have the municipal people that deal with other vulnerable groups, people that need to re-enter into the market, people that need to be re-skilled, or people that need to be skilled at first. So that will be very important to have a seat around the table when we'll talk about this Circular Economy Act, because we believe that cities have a lot to say. Lots of good examples to share, things to be scaled up, but we could definitely make their life easier, and I'm sure that we'll do it in this mandate.
Thank you so much, Louise, for your insights. I believe you gave great examples of cities' successes, starting from Amsterdam to Bordeaux, as many others, as how they're utilizing donut economy and other ways of how they use, how they're trailblazing when it comes to a circular economy. But indeed, you highlighted necessary challenges that cities are facing, such as funding or regulatory frameworks that need to change when it comes to EPR responsibility, as well as others. And I also want to highlight that you mentioned skill hearing as well as representations, which is key when it comes to talking about cities and regions and their roles here. And I think Jordi will create a perfect segue to this, as he'll provide a broader perspective when it comes to challenges as well as perspectives when it comes to circular economy. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And also, I feel younger than ever when I was introduced as a junior program manager, which feels great.
Apologies.
No, it's great. And thank you, EPC, and thank you to all the panelists. I hope I can complement, as Anna was saying, the presentations that were made. And I was not sure if the other panelists were going to use slides, so I just chose to use slides. And the focus I want to give here first is about consumption and material footprint, because I think when we talk about circular economy, we focus very much on the supply side, but not so much on the demand side and the consumption side, and the material footprint that goes with it, which basically is all the raw materials that are needed in order to to provide those services, products, etc., to citizens. And I brought here some figures to look into the material footprint per capita and put it into perspective. You can see the EU 27 here, which is around 40 to 17,000 tons per capita per year. 14,000 is on the Eurostat side. 17,000 comes from our data sets from the Circularity Gap report. And then you can see it in comparison to the global sustainable level, which is at 8,000 tons per capita. And then you can compare it to different countries, such as Ireland, for instance, with 22, or Munich, which is a city in this case, with 32. And you can definitely see that we are well beyond the material footprint that would bring us to the space that we would like to be, going to the donut economics example and the planetary boundaries that I'm sure you all are familiar with. And this means that it's about 14,000 to 70,000 kilograms of raw materials are needed each year to satisfy an average European citizen consumption, which is massive. And the question is, where does this consumption take place in Europe and worldwide? In the European case and in worldwide as well, we can say it's in cities. And I think after these interventions, it's quite clear. And cities are the hotspot of consumption. And a lot of the impacts that are happening via the consumption in cities also go beyond the borders, and that goes with the material footprint and the carbon footprint as well, if we also try to connect the circular economy agenda with the climate agenda. And regarding this, I want to mention one, changing my hat from circular economy to the Circular City Center from the European Investment Bank. We published this guidance document that is meant to help cities understanding the municipalities, local authorities, how can they incentivize, how can they use different strategies via urban planning, via restrictions, taxation, etc., influence consumption in these cities, which is not easy, but they can definitely tap into these different tools in order to influence consumption. And you can find it online, and I think it will give you many ideas and examples, such as the very well-known Paris 50-minute city. I think this has been talked and discussed in many settings, so I won't delve into it too much, but I do think it does have definitely some interesting ideas. We need to take into consideration a different context, because that's probably not scalable in every city and European city, but I do believe it does have very interesting insights. Also, the green infrastructure, which is essential. Without green infrastructure, we are not going to be able to meet our targets. And this is an example from Berlin with the Sponge City city ambitions. Then industrial symbiosis. I go back to Amsterdam, where I'm actually based, and looking at industrial symbiosis. And here is a picture actually of the port of Amsterdam and the key role that it plays in the metropolitan area, but also as a key port such as the one in the north in Groningen, but also in Rotterdam, in the whole country of the Netherlands, of course. And then also the advertisement bans and restrictions in Lyon. That's also a possibility, and in Lyon is having a big impact in order to really, enforce this type of behaviors in terms of consumption that you want your citizens to have. And another example is Barcelona's bike sharing, which has been around for many, many years, and it's working very well. And now it's introducing electric bikes, which is helping with the steepness of the city, right? And really, overcoming some of the challenges. So these are some very practical examples. Some of them maybe in that report that I mentioned, some others are just from my library of case studies, and all of them are working very well and are connected to the circular economy. And you can see that a lot is happening. There are fantastic ideas, there are technologies, knowledge and frameworks, but then why are not we closing the circularity gap? What is yet needed? And one of the crucial challenges that I found, or that I think there are to close the circularity gap, is the financial gap. And I think this is one of them. I have worked with many, many cities around Europe, and this is one of them. And projects in cities need financing, and financiers do not find the projects in cities to put their money in. So there's definitely a mismatch, a gap between both parts. In some of the insights that my colleagues from the finance program shared with me for the Circularity Finance Gap report that is going to be launched very soon, the circular economy investment flows not yet determined by impact on material use or climate impact, which this is a big statement. In construction, which is essentially in cities, the disparity is most prominent, is most pronounced, contributing to 48% of all resources use, but it's only receiving 8% of all the circular economy investment, which to me, it's a bit strange. And finally, 75% of all investment in construction was in recovery stage. So recycling, for instance, instead of the design phase or the upstream phases of construction where the impact can really be made. And these are some figures that come, and I'm sure the slides will be shared, and you can have a look at them. And I will finish with how I am personally, but also my organization, together with the European Investment Bank, trying to tackle this gap, this financial gap, is via the Circularity City Center, which is where the European Investment Bank is offering advisory services to cities to try to bridge this gap, to help cities get their projects ready for investors to come in and invest the money. And of course, this program is in collaboration with the European Investment Bank and the European Commission. And I really invite cities that are struggling with it to come to us and try to bridge this gap via these two different services that are highlighted here, the Circular City Advisory and the Circular Project Advisory, which are free of charge, and that really aim at bridging this financial gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the senior program lead today. I think you highlighted clearly the examples. We're also using city examples, but highlighting that the financial gap is truly a challenge that needs to be tackled, not only where does it come from, but where it should go and where it's best to be utilized. I think just getting all the points together, it's clear that local areas like cities are where policies find the people. So it's necessarily to highlight these facts. But to further deepen our discussion, as we have heard from our panel, I would like to move on to our respondents today. We'll hear their perspectives first, and afterwards the panel will be able to respond to their insights as well as their questions. Firstly, I will go to our respondents that's joining online, the Director of Holland's Circular Hotspot. Freek, could you please share your reflections for today? And welcome.
Hello, Anna. Good afternoon, dear circular friends. And what a wonderful team of speakers you have. I'm here with you as Director of Holland Circular Hotspot. We accelerate circular economy at the international level and create business opportunities in the process. And now the Netherlands is often considered a front runner in circular economy, and part of our success is this quadruple helix approach and top-down and bottom-up city and region-driven governance. But I have to agree with Aurel that it's Europe that's carrying the banner of future circular economy ambitions and link it with resource resilience, competitiveness, decarbonization, and access to finance. When I think of the Netherlands and lessons learned is that if you want to transition to a circular economy, you need all stakeholders on board. Nobody can do it alone. Typically, governments set the ambitions, the conditions, allow experimentations, they connect networks, support innovations, challenge industry, and they regulate, as we have heard basically from many speakers. We need knowledge institutes and their insights. We need entrepreneurs because they show guts, they take risks, they invest, they accelerate. So actually they are the main actors of scale-ups. But then cities and regions, they are really the place of action. It's the place where people work, live, recreate. And we see in the Netherlands that lots of cities or harbor regions, they start working with front runners, coalitions of the willing. They map the potential for their regions, for circular developments. They're following the metabolism of the regions. They've set up roadmaps for actions, limited to quite a limited number of focal points. I think these regions especially have this potential to drive the transition to circular economy and unlock the associated benefits, resource efficiency, job creations, societal well-being, environmental protection, self-reliance, etc. And one thing I like that what Jordi touched upon is that the involvement of citizens and consumers is crucial. Of course, the younger generations as leaders and consumers of tomorrow, but I think consumption is still the elephant in the room that we definitely need to address as well. If we keep consuming more, we'll never reach our targets. So for cities, it's important to involve businesses as actors to scale up, but how can you do that? I think cities can facilitate interdisciplinary, cross-sectoral collaboration. We're organizing workshops, giving platforms to front runners, showcase best practices, as highlighted by Jordi. By circular procurement, they can create a pull factor in the market. So there are quite some opportunities. I speak about the Netherlands and experiences, but it's definitely not linked to the Netherlands. There is a huge global, regional potential. And I think we heard from Wales about the Circular Economy Hotspot event. It started in 2016 and now takes place on 5 continents. The last one was in Wales and it was a mighty one. And all these regions focus on circular economy in their region. Dublin, Bottrop, Catalonia, Lagos, Nigeria, Santiago de Chile, etc. And they all have the same similar positive experience with circular economy. And the circular ambitions like zero waste, it's happening everywhere. It's a potential everywhere. Thanks, Rhodri, for having a wonderful event, by the way. Well, who takes the lead in such an event? Well, you need all stakeholders on board. It's a team effort, like Rhodri said. So a plan for circular economy can be initiated and developed by a local circular economy organization or a hub or a knowledge institute, or everyone who has the expertise and can connect and mediate between stakeholders. And then you define goals, you outline implementation methods, and you set steps to progress towards circularity, aligning the stakeholders, delineating responsibilities, and creating commitments. But creating the shared sense of vision is, I think, pretty crucial. And like this, the circular economy is a bottom-up force which complements public top-down governance. And maybe a work about dynamics. I think action at the international level, think about the COP climate conference, COP21, that took 21 years. Typically, international collaboration is more than 10 years. EU level can easily take 5 years. National level regulation takes between 1 and 3 years. But bottom-up action at local level can maybe start even in less than 6 months. And the power of that action is formidable. And to cities, I say, don't wait for regulation, work with front runners. However, cities, regions still need the national government. They can't do it alone. They will need to scale up. We need regulation. We need access to finance, as pointed out by Jordi. I think the path towards a circular region is rewarding. It mobilizes energy. Its circular economy is very recognizable at local level, contrary to climate actions. Think of sharing platforms, fashion libraries, repair shops, bio-based bridges. It's linked to culture, it's linked to traditions, as outlined by Louise. And I think the sense of community and belonging linked to circular action might be worth more to citizens than 1% of GDP growth. So we have quite something there. Now, after all this, I think I'm allowed to ask a question to the speakers. I think today the need for resilient cities might be greater than ever. We are in a period of political turmoil with more frequent changes in national government. The Draghi report calls for greater alignment among the EU 27. So my question would be, while we're working on top-down commitment in Europe, how can we create a stronger sense of urgency and a stronger bottom-up current in cities and regions with circularity at its center? So how do we organize ourselves for city action, this bottom-up force? Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much for your insights, Freak, and for your wonderful question. I'll move on to the next respondent, and later on we can tackle the questions all together. Please, I welcome Alexander Deschamps from Suez.
Thank you. Can you hear me? No. Hello, sir. I mean, I'll eat the microphone otherwise. Thank you very much. This was all music to my ears, and it was really fascinating to hear so many diverse speakers really go in a really positive, similar way on circular economy. I'm just going to pick out some really interesting things I heard from each and every one of you. Mr. Ciobanu, of course, you know, the Circular Economy Act is something we as Suez Waste and Water Treatment Company, who is really acting on the entire circular economy. We pick up your waste, we treat it, we recycle it. If we can't recycle it, we valorize it through energy. And so, you know, and we can also, you know, make energy through landfill if needed too. So we really are on the entire value chain of this. But we act in cities, in every territory outside of the EU and inside of the EU. So we also see the differences there. And so that Circular Economy Act is really for us an essential piece of the puzzle to bridge that gap, because we see that there is this, you know, this lack of circularity in the circular economy. We really aren't there yet. For example, that 24% incorporation target that was mentioned that is about to come, we're very excited about it. We're wondering if it will be binding. We are quite, let's say, and I'm not talking about Suez right now, I'm talking about the entire recycling industry, for example. And to just give a concrete example, the plastic recycling economy right now has more or less 3 years to live. And because of a very, very strong imports from Asia. And if we don't try and find a solution, there will be no more European recycling, plastic recycling, and we'll go for, you know, Chinese, like the Chinese solar panels, more or less. And so we really need to move fast. There are lots of solutions already on the table. We're waiting for the packaging and packaging waste directive to be implemented, a regulation, sorry. But still, lots of implementing acts need to come along. We need more control, and we need to expand those targets, not just on PET, but on PVC. You're talking about construction materials. That's a big part of it. Well, we need to really go on all the different materials. There's not just one type of plastic. There's dozens of plastics. There's not just plastics. There's critical raw materials. There's non-ferrous, ferrous metals, etc. We really need to go on those binding targets. They're not a one bullet solution to everything, but we really need to advance on that. What I thought was really interesting, Rhodri, was how you compared the extraction history of wells and how you're trying to move past it. And I think that term is really interesting because we see cities now as the new mines of the 21st century. We can talk about it as urban mining. Right now, we don't extract from, you know, from traditional mines, but the real mines today are in our everyday bins. We need to extract a lot more. We need to use all of the materials. For example, we have a factory of Recycable, which does the recycling of copper cables, where if you have all of our networks that are being renewed for the 4G, 5G, well then, you know, this, and copper is a critical raw material. So urban mining is the new mining in a way. One thing that's really the nerf de la guerre, as we say in France, is, and I heard Louise mention it first, was the word price. And the real issue is that virgin materials are cheaper than secondary raw materials. And it's just the biggest conundrum because we want to incentivize it. And we have, as waste material providers and managers, our main issue is that we are not traditional miners. So we cannot close the mine, wait for the prices to go back up, and then start selling again or digging more product. So we have an obligation to treat all of the waste that arrives. And so for that, we do not control pricing in a way. And one of the main issues is that, contrary to other things where we realize actually if we want, for example, electricity prices are fluctuating and can go really high, well, people have decided that we can make PPPs, power purchase agreements. Well, we think it would be a great idea if people would be willing to do, let's say, material purchase agreements. So maybe they won't get the best price at every time, but maybe for 20 years, we can give them long-term access at a regular price on critical raw materials or other type of materials, plastic, paper, recycled paper, etc. So we're really looking for ways to how we can ensure that we can make the investments on opening a big factory, because factories need to be open for decades and decades. So that question of price is essential. And one thing I heard Jordi saying, what's the main issue? It's the funding gap. Well, we say it's the business case gap. If there's a business case, there'll be funding. Funding, you know, we're all waiting to make investments. It's just because there's a lack of business case. Why are people not ready to pay 1 cent more their plastic bottle just because it's made out of recycled plastic? I think they are ready to do it, but maybe companies who have to do their corporation might not want to do it. So there's lots of different things to say. And one of the last messages was we need to tackle our consumption. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's the issue right now, but right now, Europe is not reducing their consumption. Just in Belgium, and Eurostat numbers came out this week. So just in Belgium, there's been a 50% increase or more of waste per person. So municipal waste went from 455 kilos of waste per year for a person in 1995, and in 2023 it was 689 kilos of waste per person. So, you know, right now we've got legislation that is telling us no more landfilling. Okay, then we want to put ETS on our incinerators. Okay, but then we can't invest in recycling because it's a bit expensive. So companies such as Suez are looking at, okay, we know where we want to be at in 10 years, 20 years in that world where the circular economy, and we can resell all of these critical and non-critical raw materials and have this market. But we're at a stage where we don't know how to jump to that world where the business case is still not there yet. So this is a conundrum that I hope we'll be able to work on collectively in the next few years, especially this mandate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your industry perspective. Now I would like to invite Eileen from Zero Waste Europe for her insights. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Aline Megret from Zero Waste Europe, representing civil society here. So yeah, like you, Aurel, I guess I'm also traveling from Brussels event to Brussels event, repeating the same answer to the same intervention from the Commission. So hopefully also not too boring intervention from my side. No, but joke aside, I wanted to bring 2 points here after listening to this conversation. Well, firstly, I think thank you very much. I think it's for organizing this event, because I think it's very refreshing to not only hear about EU-related developments, but also see what's happening at like regional and city level. At Zero Waste Europe, we do follow and work on EU-level legislations, but we also have an implementation leg following also progress at regional and also city level. Some of my colleagues have worked with some of you, I believe. I think what I've really appreciated here is that we do highlight indeed effort that have been made when it comes, for example, to recycling, 66%. Wow, I mean, that's great. But at the same time, we also showcase that it also goes hand in hand with waste prevention measures, looking at reuse, repair. And unfortunately, it's what I'm a bit missing in the current EU political context, that we very much focus our effort on like boosting recycled materials, which indeed is very much needed, but how can the EU also be inspired from also work at regional and city level to also continue the efforts, because we are still overshooting planetary boundaries, and that will be very much needed, whatever the political context is. So just bringing that up here, and yeah, very interesting examples that have been brought from a city level, but I also think one that I also wanted to bring, although I'm not an expert here, but I heard that in France also some cities have also put like restricted advertisement in public spaces to really hint at like reducing also the consumption. So I think, of course, we might get a little bit like outside of, some people could argue it's outside of the scope of circular economy, but that's, I think, still very interesting and relevant in this discussion. So could we be yeah, also inspired by?
Oh, could we have a new microphone, please? And again, sadly, it has to be super close.
Yes. Okay.
There we go.
And then a second point that I wanted to mention was on health and toxicity. I think, Louise, you already briefly touched upon it. I think nowadays it is widely recognized that the effectiveness of circularity is really hindered by hazardous chemicals that are present in our system. And I want to make sure that today in this room, we are, I don't know, I guess that we can agree on some kind of common definition of what circular economy is. And that's, yeah, health and toxicity also is included in that, as we are talking about, yeah, like boosting the use of recycled materials, but also making decision on waste management in the context, for example, of Circular Economy Act. Can we also ensure that it is not at the expense of recirculating toxics and human, that is like really bad for human health. So my question, I guess, is hearing a bit more on like this perspective from all of you, but especially I guess also look at the European Commission and Aurel to see how can also safety and health be also a competitive edge for Europe, because I did my homework. I did the read the Clean Industrial Deal communication, but I'm lacking a bit of details on that. So I'd welcome any views also from any of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Eileen, for your civil society perspective. I believe now we can tackle the question. I will start from the top, which was how we can create a stronger urgency for a bottom-up approach and how we can have circularity be the main role here. I think due to the expertise of regional and local as well, I think I'll give this question first to Louise and then Rhodri, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. So on how we could like initiate more initiative or scale up all the bottom-up initiative, because I mean, I understood. He's not there anymore. I understand that indeed we have lots of bottom-up initiatives at the local and the regional level. They may be known, not unknown, but that's not really the question. But for me, the question is, how do you scale up? Because indeed we have lots of very nice local initiatives, but if you don't scale up, they will just remain nice local initiatives, but most of them have huge potential. And when I told you about this app in Haarlem where you can match the supply and demand for secondary construction materials, it's something that we could imagine on a much larger scale. When some cities in the Nordic region, they use old car parks, to store like material banks, and again to create a market, and to match the supply and demand. This is done between cities. This is done also between countries, right? You may know that also some Nordic cities, but not only Nordic, lots of Eastern European cities have integrated a pictogram system. You may have seen it. So it's the same pictogram on all consumer goods for all those countries and all those regions, right? And so people know what to do with their waste. When you live in Malmö and you go to Copenhagen for a meeting and you have your I don't know, your bottle, and you want to throw it away. Well, in these countries, you put them in the container so they can be reused. You have the same pictogram, so you know exactly in which container we pick it. The GRC was looking at this system, but I don't know where it is at the moment, because that should be expanded. All those nice local initiatives could be expanded. So we have also lots of bottlenecks, and I touch upon many. Of course, we have the investment gap or the business case gap, we call it as we want. We have also the issue of fragmented market. We still have a fragmented market in the EU for secondary materials, and we have the issue of chemicals, and we should definitely address this one from the EU level. Although, because again, if we don't want to fragment again the market, some things for the bottom up initiative to work and scale up, you will need an EU regulatory framework that is fostering circular economy. So I think it goes hand in hand, and you cannot just push on one side and not do on the other one.
Thank you so much, Rhodri. Please explain from a regional perspective and representing the government, especially what is it like collaborating with the local to make the bottom-up approach stronger, create that urgency, and have circularity at the root?
Yeah, so what struck me in terms of Frick's question around particularly creating a stronger sense of urgency is a lot of that exists already, but it's just how we think of the questions. If we think about what are the top level priorities, and like I would suggest the vast majority of governments, the Welsh government's got an absolute key priority, which is about the green growth of the economy and jobs. And in terms of the growth of the economy, we're looking at that in the context of, as you cast forward, we're working in a globally decarbonizing economy. So it's not success in the economy that we used to define it. It's success in the way that the economy will be transitioning and will be transforming, and how we're competitive and successful in that. And also, of course, at the moment, a huge focus on resilience. So how do we become resilient in that context and apply it there? So the circular economy becomes very, very relevant to these challenges, because it is inherently a way to be able to address the priorities that we do have, but we just need to connect the dots on them to make sure that we see how directly relevant it is. And that generates already a very strong sense of urgency. In terms of the bottom-up force, I mean, we take a way of working, particularly through recycling, but now on reuse and repair, where we've worked to make it as easy as possible for people to have convenient services that help them to do the right thing, to be able to do, to increase their recycling, and now to repair and reuse, to make sure that it becomes part of everyone's everyday, and to make sure it becomes normalized in society. So you can create that service, you can create the access to that service, but of course you do need to join up with the bigger picture requirements that ultimately to take you all the way that we need to go to net zero, because you need fundamentally things like eco-design, right to repair, and those aspects to be acting as well. But you can certainly generate a huge amount of momentum and a bottom up that will take you a long way. With us on recycling, we've certainly gone a long way, but now you start to look down the products and say, is this actually recyclable? Is the design right that it can be dealt with in that way? Otherwise, you're going to get a barrier to where you get the remaining rate of returns. So I definitely agree with Louise that it's the combination of the two, but it's definitely the case that bottom-up approaches, and particularly, I think it was described, apologies, I can't remember who described it this way, but they did so very well, in terms of the ability of cities and regions to be real delivery engine rooms, to be able to drive the approach. And that can go a long way on its own, even without that context in place, not necessarily getting you the full way, but it is a key part of the jigsaw.
Thank you so much for your answer. I think now we could tackle the second one. Alexandra pointed out many things that we need to talk and reference to, but particularly I will reference the Circular Economy Act that is upcoming. And she mentioned that it's interesting to know what could be the targets that will be seen and what could be binding. And additionally, she mentioned the importance of different sectors and different materials that Europe is facing and how that will play a role. And perhaps we can also touch upon safety and health and toxicity in this question. And afterwards, perhaps Jordi, you can talk more about the business case, the financial gap based on your expertise. Okay, Aurel, please.
Thank you very much, and no offense, but I think I will try to reorient a little bit my second intervention, and I will be shorter than first time. in order to address the issue of regions and cities. I have not addressed this in my initial intervention, but I think this is an important point, no doubt. And indeed, the question asked, I think, by Freek van Eyck, how do you scale up and how do you engage and create bottom-up drive is a very pertinent one. Of course, we have the experience of sharing good practices, engaging through the Committee of Regions, public dialogues, visits, etc. This is important for the dissemination of the good ideas, but probably when we look across the continent, we see a lot of very good and inspiring examples, and the examples that have created school and followers, both at the level of the regions and of some regions and at the level of some municipalities. But we have seen also the contrary. And how do you change this? I believe through structural interventions, I think. And structural interventions can be, they are not alternative, but you must take some regulatory ones. And for instance, the Circular Economy Act could bring such interventions, and I will give a few examples. And non-regulatory ones, support measures, yeah, because there are opportunities and there are challenges. Rightly so, Louise has mentioned here the purchasing power of public authorities, not only local, but local authorities are quite numerous. Can we leverage this to create demand? And yes, we have in mind, for instance, regulatory intervention as an example, but we are looking for its concretization. So to lay down a small number of simple mandatory public procurement criteria for certain materials or for certain goods. And because Alexandra has also raised a similar issue here, suggesting material purchase agreements, we are thinking also about maybe setting up a framework where the interested economic operators or public authorities could join their efforts in procurement platforms. Yeah, so an instrument available to all those interested to create scale with their demand and also bring down the prices. And we can think also about non-regulatory measures in complement with the regulatory ones to support the advances or to support the drive of those who want to scale up the activities. And it's not only about recycling, it's also about other elements, repair, reuse, and things like this, and bring scale. I refer to the investment compass. Some of you might have seen in the Clean Industrial Deal communication that we mention the transregional circularity hubs, which is also a sort of, let's say, framework instrument that we want to put maybe as a public an enterprise of common public European interest, to put it at the disposition of public authorities as IPCEI have been set up, but to open it also to the economic operators, and not to think just in terms of public authorities from at government level as IPCEI have been created, but to open it to regional and local authorities. They should be also able to team up, maybe sometimes together with economic operators, to create these trans-regional hubs, bearing in mind that sometimes it is not worth the investment to think that we will set up, I don't know, enterprises for chemical recycling of mattresses in each member state, or for other materials, or for other end of waste products. But sometimes you need to think besides the borders of a single member state. But there is also the other side of the coin, not just opportunities, the opportunities and the good practices, there are the challenges. And we need to look also at the shortcomings. And yes, cities, I will say maybe a little bit of a nasty thing, cities and regions are the cradle of political power. They're inspiring leaders of their communities, bring the future closer to their communities and to the citizens, take the lead, develop the good practices you have mentioned here, both at regional and citizens level. But the cradle of political power acts sometimes as a conservative factor and as a brake. And because sometimes political leaders don't want to bother the citizens if the landfilling rate is high, why should I apply high fees at the entry into the landfill? Because this will bring me less voters, not more. And so on and so on. There are a few other examples. So how do we overcome this? And we think also about overcoming certain things. For instance, remaining high landfilling rates in about half of the EU member states, which are not today on the 11th of March 2025, are not by far not where they should be to this day. So how do we overcome this? And this landfilling is not an abstract issue that happens at national level. It happens in every community, and you need to address this. And we are thinking, for instance, at maybe because there are people who are suggesting that the next revision of the emission trading schemes of the European Union should cover waste to energy installations. This will create a perverse incentive to maybe landfill more. Yeah, and therefore we cannot maybe rely on the traditional instrument of the landfilling directive with its toothless target of 10% landfilling by 2035, and we are not even by far there, or getting really there. So we are thinking about a cap and trade mechanism that should be applied nationally, but with strict and tight rules. So we do not want to create another ETS for landfilling at the level of the European Union, but this should be nationally managed, however, according to stricter rules, and mandating also a number of economic criteria in order to prevent the temptation inevitable to go for the lowest fees even in such a system. It's quite challenging, and we have in mind also other how to say, expressions of the conservative force of some regions in particular. When you think about, but this is also, we have to admit, inbuilt in some of the existing regulations and needs to be fixed. For instance, it is mind-boggling to realize that this European system of end-of-waste criteria relies on 3 layers of criteria at European level, at national level, and also at regional level. And here come the echoes from different regions in some member states, which I will not mention here, showing how barriers are created for the movement of waste and resources even within a single member state. I mean, how could have this been proposed by somebody in the Waste Framework Directive, and how this could have been voted? But it has been voted, it is there. And it's easier to put a nail in the table than to take it out. So you will see the drama of repealing the power of the regions to define end of waste criteria. Stay tuned. So there are, I could comment also on several other issues, including on the hazardous chemicals. And we are concerned about, and we hear what downstream users, as they call the manufacturers of goods incorporating chemicals, what they face, and the barriers to circularity and the economic loss they face, the issue will become even strikingly, how to say, visible with the PFAS restriction. That we will have to address from all angles, from the design to the end of life of materials. We are actively thinking about this. I wouldn't say that there is a miraculous solution. Some agility will be necessary there, because I think there is an inbuilt slow motion in the system, and maybe we can be faster in running certain procedures. But yes, we are aware, and we are actively thinking to tackle this. But I will maybe end my intervention, if I may, saying that because you have mentioned indeed the challenge of the imbalance of prices between virgins, and indeed it's one of the two economic conundrums that we need to address and to solve for circularity, to move from the front runners and the pioneers, and excuse me for this, the marginals, to the main, not marginals, I'm over dramatizing a little bit, but the pioneers, but by far not dominating the economy, to the mainstream, and to become the prevailing economic model. You have the challenge of the imbalance between virgin and recyclates, and the economic and labor challenge. Is the circular economy business model going to create more jobs than the linear traditional economic model of production, which is based on more consumption that fuels the production, and this fuels the profits? So how do you create more jobs than this linear model? Can we look frankly now at the circular economy activities and services and say that if I make washing machines, or I don't know what, longer lasting, doubling their life through repair, and so how do you respond to this? This is an issue that we need to address in a reassuring way. I'm not saying the Circular Economy Act will not do this necessarily, because I think it's a more complex issue, but public authorities will have to address this issue and to develop how to say, constant, systematic policies that address this matter, because it addresses the future of people. And you don't have people with you if you do not reassure them that they have a future in today's societies. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Aurel, for your insights, as well as looking into possibly what the agenda could contain with the cap and trade framework, as well as the waste framework directive changing and the repealings happening. So thank you for your insight. Jordi, please add on to what has been said thus far, as well as the business case.
Yeah, well, a lot has been said, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but myself or others, yeah. But linking to what you were saying, Aurel, because I think, yes, I think a circular economy can provide more jobs than a linear economy. I do think so, but also, especially by changing the question you were addressing, right? Because you were asking, or many people are asking about the business case for the circular economy. But what about the human well-being case, right? What if we start shifting some incentives, some priorities, especially through policy making, which I believe is somewhat what Aurel was referring to in a way, and linking to the true pricing that I believe, Louise, you mentioned at some point, but also procurement you mentioned at some point, right, which can be a big driver for a lot of circular economy offering services via the public sector. That we know it has been being spoken for years and years and years, and still is just a case study. Can we just streamline it a bit more? I wonder. And then, in my opinion, it's very much about taxation, tariffs, and tax cuts. So I don't see other economic incentives or ways of starting to pull or press the buttons in order to make the circular economy more attractive for some businesses and more attractive for citizens as well, right? For both sides, and maybe that's. I mean, I don't want to be speaking for minutes and minutes about this because I would be oversimplifying a very complex issue. But I will leave it to that. But going back to maybe what Frick mentioned in terms of how to create a bottom-up sense of urgency, and because I think that's very important, right? Because that also alleviates a bit of the burden on the European Commission, and also creates some strength at the bottom, right? In the different cities, etc., which it's also needed. And I think Frick can also provide us with a lot of clarity on that, because I think you have been doing an amazing job with the Holland Circular Hotspot. But I think here, working on a regional scale, as you were mentioning, I think this is crucial, or even cross-regional, because the coordination between cities with different parties, different political priorities, even at the European level, different countries having different mandates that don't overlap with each other. It's a big mess. It's difficult to coordinate all that. So you really need to have these tools to do this regional and cross-regional coordination, and also these enabling factors or enabling tools that are already there in many cases. And I do feel that from a policy level to the very municipal level, there's many times a disconnect of the information available, communication. And I do see that sometimes in the Brussels bubble, which I'm not so much in it. I mean, you mentioned the Brussels bubble, and I'm tangentially to it.
In Luxembourg.
Okay. Just like my fellows from the European Investment Bank. And I mean, I do work in the space, but I do feel sometimes there's a little disconnect, and maybe some cities, if they are here, they maybe can talk about it, because I mean, the Commission is doing a lot for cities in terms of the Circular Cities and Regions initiative that we are part of, that I think is providing a lot of knowledge, is providing a lot, I mean, knowledge capacity building, sharing mechanisms between cities. Cities can join an initiative and meet other cities who are maybe facing similar challenges. You can also receive advisory service, as I was mentioning, by the C3. You have access to that, but many cities don't even know that this exists. And that's a reality of maybe a vast majority of cities. And I don't know who, it's not about blaming anyone, but that's a reality. And we need to make an effort for cities to really get acquainted with these initiatives that can, as I was saying, give access to free advisory, to financing and funding, which I think if these efforts would be streamlined, the scale up of this movement and the bottom up also, scalability of a lot of the examples that were mentioned would definitely, have a better chance to be, achieved, in my opinion. And I will leave it to that.
Thank you, Jordi, for touching upon the respondents' insights, as well as highlighting cross-collaboration. That is key, as well as the knowledge gap between cities. I think now we have heard quite a lot from the panel, as well as the respondents, and I'm sure the audience is quite eager to participate, so we can transfer to our Q&A session. I would like to remind that those that are online, they can continue writing their questions in the chat, and those of you that remain here, you can simply just raise your hand and the microphone will be brought to you. And if comfortable, please state your name and affiliation. Perhaps first we can start here with the audience. Who will be the brave soldier possibly? Oh, I already see a hand here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Piotr Apacz, the European Commission, DG Environment, Unit C3, dealing with air quality and urban initiatives. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion so far. I would just like to add one element that might help with some of the issues that have been discussed here, especially in the outreach and maybe showing cities and communities in general that things can be done, let's say, in a more effective way when it comes to circular economy. So besides the initiatives that were already mentioned, we also have the Green City Accord, which currently has 118 cities. And among the 5 areas it covers, one is circularity, where we have, let's say, 3 indicators, including municipal waste generated per capita. And we see that that our cities, the GCA cities, perform better than the cities overall by at least 20% when it comes to the circularity indicators. By the way, there was a first report that was published 2 months ago on that. And also a related initiative that maybe is more interesting from the point of view of showing other cities leading the way is our awards. So we have the European Green Capital Award and European Green Leaf Awards. And among 7 areas which are assessed for the cities to actually receive the award, circularity is one of the areas. So I think the cities that are receiving the awards are naturally the, let's say, the pioneers or trailblazers, and other cities can get a look what they're doing well. So voila, that was this 2 cents from me. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your 2 cents. Do you perhaps have a question for the panel dedicated, or? Okay, thank you for your insights. Anyone else here? There's one in the back and then another one here. That's okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Paolo Campanella from FEAD, the European Waste Management Association. I have a couple of questions. One for Mr. Asby. He mentioned the Circular Economy Fund in Wales. It would be interesting to hear how does it work, where the funds come from, and I would relate also this to what Alexandra mentioned, to the business case gap, how this can be related to the gap that we have for circular economy. And another question for Aurel regarding the measures in the Circular Economy Act. In the Clean Industrial Deal, most has been mentioned in relation to critical raw materials, but we know that also other waste streams today have failures. Will you face only critical raw materials or also something else? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Perhaps first we'll take one more from Alexandra.
It was just a little thing that I forgot to mention. And when we talk about pricing, Rhodri, you mentioned that there was carbon pricing now obligations in your laws. And one thing that we forget to mention is the positive externalities of recycling, for example, and that is not included in the price. And that's one of the reasons why right now your critical, your primary raw materials are, your virgin are cheaper than your secondary raw materials. And how could we include this pricing? I mean, I'm not saying we want an ETS on everything. It could be very complicated. How could, in a simple way, we could include this positive pricing of, you this 5 times to 8 times less CO2 on a recycled product, plastic recycled than non-recycled. How can we include this, which could, re-alleviate the issue of pricing? It's just a little other thing, because it could be one solution. Then, the how we do it is another issue.
Thank you so much. Perhaps we can start with you, Rhodri.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, to Paolo's question about the Circular Economy Fund, just to give you a very quick overview, I mean, there are several crucial ingredients to what we've managed to achieve in recycling, but one of those was funding for infrastructure, and that funding was from government. That was that is still allocated to our local authorities to be able to upgrade their infrastructure in order to be able to do it. So what we did with the Circular Economy Fund was take what was previously much more limited waste management funding historically, and look to see actually how we could broaden that out so that we can now not just keep funding local authorities, but expand the funding to local government, so that it's not just about recycling, it's about repair and reuse, and it's about wider behavior change and community engagement, but also funding businesses. And there are lots of examples I could provide to you. Happy to give you case studies, but for example, to help them to be able to change their production, to be able to use recycled material instead of virgin raw material, and then benefit from the material, obviously, that we're collecting now very successfully in Wales. As part of that, just a short, also additional answer to the business case question, which is really important. A core part of the transition in Wales for our local government has been the fact that transitioning to better management, better waste management to recycling, and now also as we build the trajectory towards repair and reuse. For recycling, when you transition to high quality recycling, the comparative business case is absolutely there. So you can save money in terms of the service for the municipality. You can also gain the income from the recyclate that you're then able to sell. And then in comparison, of course, one of the mechanisms that's worked for us on landfill has been the landfill tax, which gets more expensive. And so you have those drivers then pointing in the right direction that makes the comparative business case for the investment then very successful. And that has been a core part of the transition to date. And obviously what we'd want to do going forward is to make sure that we can equally have the success of that business case underneath now the investment that's needed towards repair and reuse to move higher up the waste hierarchy.
Thank you so much, Aurel, please.
Yeah, very briefly, I did not, to Paulo's question about the focus on CRMs, I deliberately not maintained in my intervention this focus because I wanted, but maybe I should put it clearly, we clearly intend to go beyond CRMs. So CRMs are important and some measures will address them. For instance, the reform of the rules on waste, electric and electronic equipment, but we want to go beyond there. There is important economic merit to think about steel and aluminium and plastic as well. These are materials which incorporate high amounts of energy and where there is a good business case to think about a number of elements. And Alexandra has asked about how to reward the positive externalities of recyclate and circular materials and goods. So one of the instruments that we are having in mind, we don't have too many in mind about this. It's a very difficult issue, but it could play an important role. So extended producer responsibility schemes. So we want the Circular Economy Act to reform also these, and probably we will repeal the provisions in the Waste Framework Directive and redo them under the form of a regulation, maybe devoted only to this, even if it's a small one. And instead of having minimum criteria, we would like to have mandatory criteria and to focus on the uniform mandatory criteria. So the EPR schemes will remain national. We don't want to scare anyone, but functioning according to uniform mandatory criteria, including some strong language about, but we cannot come with numeric provisions that will mandate the producer responsibility organizations in each member state to recognize a stark contrast between the price of the fee to be paid for products resulting from circular economy activities and the fees to be paid by products which do not result from such activities. And I mean not only recycled content, I mean also reusable material, I mean goods, repairable goods, longer lasting goods, and so on. But you don't solve all the problems with this. And yeah, it will be, we have a few other things, but we need to test them further. Of course, everyone's mind fly, and ours as well, flew towards fiscal measures, but yes, this is also a conservative environment. All these fiscalists who sleep and work in the ministries of finance of the member states are very conservative people, and they say, oh, exemptions from the VAT rate. No, 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 we have closed the list and swallowed the key, because the list of exemptions is a list of lobbies. And if we open the door, there will be a lot of lobbying besides you, all the hairdressers and so on and so on. So when we have we have been sat on the same bench with the hairdressers, then our ambition, or not our ambition, our intentions have changed. And there is something maybe to do in terms of VAT rates, but not very much. Yeah, and we have to be aware of the requirement of the unanimity. I was hoping to find political ambition to exploit the passerelle clause, which exists among others in the chapter of the treaty on the functioning of the European Union devoted to climate, energy, and environment, or environment and energy. There is a passerelle clause allowing the Council to vote with unanimity, the transition from unanimity to qualified majority. But the political ambition is very tall for such a thing. So it's more difficult. So we need to think in other terms, and we would welcome all the suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise. I saw you nodding. Do you perhaps want to add on to the questions?
No, it was I was nodding at what Aurel was saying, because we have been discussing those issues. Of course, the price incentive would be a good one. It will create some clarity on the market. It will ensure that producer will go towards more sustainable produce more sustainable products, and will give a boost to circular economy. I agree with Aurel that the current political system may make it very complicated to go ahead with such an EPR scheme, but it will be definitely welcome. As I started also my intervention, cities are bearing the cost of the waste management currently. It means that citizens are bearing the cost of waste management currently, because who are paying the taxes to the functioning of cities? It's all of us, right? So when we don't extract all the urban mining and all the resources we have in our bins, at the end we pay for this waste, us as citizens. And then our cities don't invest in schools or cycling infrastructure, because they have to deal with more and more waste. So I'm definitely in favor of having those price incentives through EPR scheme or any other ways you will find, Aurel, in a very creative way to push. I'm just being pragmatic here. We struggle to push any progressive ID linked, and I know you started your intervention, Aurel, by saying that we are continuing with the European Green Deal. Yes and no. I will say that the ambition that we all had in 2019, we struggle a bit. We have to change our discourses and our narrative. We have to take the angle of jobs and growth, and we do it. We play the game, right? But saying that we'll increase the price of a plastic bottle, even if it's 1 cent. I come from France. I've discovered the yellow jackets. It has made lots of troubles in my country. It's going to be difficult to move ahead and increase prices in a very tense economic situation across Europe. But here, I would like to, if we have solutions and if we can be enthusiastic and positive about it, yes, I will be happy to follow.
Thank you so much. Before we take other questions from the audience, perhaps we have online questions.
Yes, we have a question from Mr. Dimitri Korpakis. What could be the possible impact of a more structured approach to a circular economy on EU's competitiveness, and what could be the impact on smaller companies?
Thank you so much. Perhaps, Aurel, would you want to tackle this, or?
I haven't understood. So impact on smaller companies and
competitiveness. Yes.
Well, we hope that the impact will be positive, and I don't have in mind, I don't think only about the Circular Economy Act, but in general, we have tried to propose policies and measures that make economic sense and create a level playing field for most, if not all, of the economic operators on the market. Now, of course, they are not always just winners, but in general, the measures taken have been prevalently beneficial. This is why also all economic actors need to try to look at tomorrow and what can they do in order to future-proof their activities, their business model, and things like this. But I would like to reassure those concerned about this question that, as I have said earlier, for instance, when preparing the Circular Economy Act, we are thinking about measures, interventions that make good business sense.
Thank you so much. I think we can go for one more round from the audience. So please raise your hand if you have any questions. I see one in the middle. Anyone else? Well,
thank you so much. So I'm Ulrike from EKD. I would like to come back to the question of how to raise the sense of urgency. And please do correct me if I'm wrong, but can you hear me properly? Okay. I assume that most of the raw materials that we're talking about are actually sourced from outside the EU or outside of Europe. And I think we've seen in the past that we've created some dependencies there and so on. So my question would be, would you think that, especially in the geopolitical context that we find ourselves in right now, there's a window of opportunity to increase the sense of urgency, actually, along with the raised awareness within Europe to become more self-sufficient?
Thank you. We'll take the question from the back as well.
Thank you, Barbara Michel from Euractiv. I have a question for Aurel. If you could just explain a bit more your thinking on the cap and trade system for waste. So would the idea be shifting away from an ETS for incineration and applying a dedicated national cap and trade system? Would it include other activities, or would it be just incineration? So the idea is to prevent landfilling, is that it? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, let's take one more question and then we can.
Thank you. My name is Axel Griffon. I work at the CMR, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. I would like to echo a bit what was said before by Louise regarding the shift towards the Green Deal. We see a stronger support for the industry to enhance competitiveness, which is good, but it also raises question when it comes to support to territorial level. And we need to ensure that we keep a balanced economic development, not concentrating all the investments in already competitive areas, but ensure a good balance. And last remark and question, there is a wave of simplification currently, as well addressed maybe for the industry. And when we discussed a bit public procurement and possible criteria, I would like to ensure that it will not lead to excessive administrative burden for cities. So I would like to know if it's possible to really stick to a set of very simple criteria and make it flexible enough for municipalities to be able to implement them, and maybe in a form of an incentive rather than compulsory. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the questions. I believe with the first one on how to raise urgency, I would like to bring it back to Jordi. Perhaps you could tackle that question and then we'll tackle the others. The question was about how we could raise urgency, I believe, and
the strategic
autonomy. Yes.
Of course, the Commission has also comments.
Of course.
I mean, I don't know if I'm the
Most-
right one to
most
answer
of the
that,
comments are.
but I definitely think that. I mean, we learned that from during the pandemic, right? I think you raised that question yourself. Was it you?
My question was basically right now.
Have provided the answer.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that goes beyond cities and goes on a wider scale. Yeah.
The rest of the questions, I believe, were towards Aurel, all of them. So,
No, but
the
just
floor is-
indeed asking, I mean, the comments are very pertinent indeed. And one of the arguments in favor of circularity are not just the decarbonization, but also the contribution to strengthening the strategic autonomy and taking control of as many supply chains as we can, but in a competitive manner, not in an administrative manner. So this is why, for instance, the focus is also, while our ambition and vision and plans go beyond circular raw material, critical raw materials, we also envisage to do where we can do something meaningful for circularity to address critical raw materials, for instance, in waste, electric and electronic equipment, and going beyond the small ICT area and looking also at other, I mean, technologies that have been developed and scaled up over the past 10, 15 years, wind farms, heat pumps, and where there are significant amounts of critical raw materials. Also thinking about steel and aluminium and how we can retain as much scrap as possible in Europe when you know that aluminium is materialized energy and steel is not very far from this, is very important from this perspective. But again, not through administrative measures, as some who think that only export restrictions will do the trick and destroy the market of recycling in the European Union, but through smart measures for demand creation. Yeah, this is very important as well. So I can confirm. I would like to refer to the, I mean, you understood everything. The cap and trade system will be for landfills and landfilling, yeah? Because as a complement to the enlargement potential, but relatively likely, we have to face the truth, expansion of the ETS system to include waste to energy. So in order to address the perverse incentives that such an inclusion of waste to energy plants into the ETS system, we need also to bring an economic mechanism to encourage to discourage landfilling, yeah, and encourage economically the recycling and the prevention, the waste prevention measures as well. And public procurement criteria, we are totally with you. Less on incentives. We believe that voluntary measures have proven that they are not so efficient, but we are totally with you when you refer to simple criteria and not 20 because, and not taking 50 pages because goodbye. Nobody wants to buy based on this, but 3-4 criteria that fit in a short provision that appears in the text of the legislative proposal itself. It's also a matter of predictability for businesses and democratic scrutiny instead of sending to an implementing or delegated measure that is adopted 2 years after the legislation, and it takes 10 years until you get to implementation. So you have it in the proposal, you have the Parliament and the Council discussing it, and then when it enters into force, the criteria will become mandatory and should no longer require 30 pages of guidance, manual, etc. But we have to get there. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just add something? Sorry,
Yes, of course.
public procurement, as the focus was really on cities and regional authorities. Public procurement can actually be a nightmare for this administration that are understaffed. It hasn't helped with the pandemic. So when it comes to public procurement, most of the time the national authorities get trained on how to use the new measures of the EU, but it doesn't scale down into regions and local authorities. So if we have new public procurement rules, and I'm looking at you, Aurel, on that, it would be very important to train city staff and not only national authorities, hoping that they will train cities administration afterwards, because it doesn't happen. Or if it happens in 1 or 2 cities. So new rules of public procurement, if we want to avoid that it's completely discarded or disregarded, we will need to have like capacity training in cities administration, just in brackets.
Thank you so much. Please, Rhodri.
Because it's come up a couple of times as well, I wanted to mention that some of the work that we're doing to implement our circular economy strategy is via public procurement. And we've got commitments which are around procuring sustainable materials and recycled materials and driving that through our public procurement in order to create the market for it and create the incentive, and also get that circularity to work in action. The other bit that I think we haven't quite addressed, which I was going to very quickly, about not the sense of urgency per se, but more around building the momentum and creating solutions, is that there is a real importance for people who are out there innovating, because there's nothing better than talking to an area, be it a city, be it a municipality, or be it a regional government, who's actually been through that process and can pass you the tips of doing it. So we find with change, particularly with our municipalities, that some of them have those barriers to change, where they find it very difficult. But the more that they can talk directly to another municipality that's been through it, and they might have a bumpy couple of months with regards to the engagement with the public in changing and upgrading their service, for example. But if they know that out the other side, people prefer it and they're much better off in a number of ways, it helps to be able to bolster that and gives them the confidence to be able to go through it. So that sharing of good practice and that sharing of experience can translate into real meaningful, being able to pull down the barriers that would otherwise be there to the change that's needed.
Thank you so much. Now we're at the end of the event, but before I let you all go, I would like to ask maybe final remarks, keeping to just 1 word or 2 words. I know that's a challenge, but we don't have much time. Perhaps I'll give the challenge to you, Jordi.
Okay. Yeah, to keep it short, as I started, I think let's focus on demand side and not so much on supply side in the transition. I think there's too much focus on supply and not so much in demand. And in the past years, I've been seeing, from what Louise was saying, right, when we were looking at circular economy 5-10 years ago, we saw a lot of pilot projects, a lot of flagship projects that were very inspiring, but Amsterdam and a few cases. But I do see a convergence, and I do see now the momentum, the tools from regulation, funding, the business sector also like coming together, and I do see now the energy to bring it to a next level in a coordinated manner. So I think I will leave it to that and pass it on to Aurel, I guess.
You missed it, Aurel. Just a 1 word, quick farewell.
So we also understand the need, and I think this will also contribute, should have an economic and psychological and maybe political role. We understand the need to offer a longer term perspective to public authorities and to economic operators, and maybe also to citizens alike, and that they see that the drive remains there and what is the lane on which we will advance. This is also an element that we will have to take into account, both when we design the interventions in the Circular Economy Act, but also when we will draw some messages that will be in the communication accompanying the Circular Economy Act. Certainty about the predictability of having predictable public policies can have a positive economic and social role, I believe, and we will try to contribute to this. Thank you.
Then I'll keep this very short. My two words would be consumption and opportunity. Consumption, because as it's rightly come up multiple times today, we have to look at where consumption is at the moment, the patterns of consumption and the scale of consumption, and it has to be addressed on that basis so that we address the whole system. Opportunity, because I think it's nice to end an event like this on the note that there are such a lot of opportunities to improve our circularity, which can bring very real benefits to citizens. And so I think there are a huge amount of solutions there, but we have to look at the solutions that drive multiple benefits, not just target individual silos in isolation.
Absolutely. And based on what has been said, but also on the conversation we had, let's work together. We are almost all aligned on the direction of the journey we want all to achieve at the end, a society where we can all thrive and to leave no gaps to our children. So let's work together, because with all the levels of government being local, regional, we didn't have the national representative, but EU representative, and then the civil society and the businesses, we all want to work together. So let's do it and let's make it happen.
Thank you so much. A very big thank you to our amazing panel today. I think they left us with illuminating reflections on policy outlooks, regional perspective, as well as local city insights, and overall just circular economy as a whole. Additionally, I would like to have a big thank you for the respondents as well for participating and giving their reflections. A huge thank you for the Welsh government for supporting this event, as well as EPC for organizing. And most importantly, thank you to the audience for giving such engaging and insightful questions, because it's because of your engagement that this conversation is dynamic and important and meaningful. So thank you all once again for coming. I wish you a pleasant day, and hopefully I'll see you at more EPC events.